Mr. Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I want to follow up on some of the questions regarding executive compensation, including the bonus structure. And Mr. Sullivan, let me start with you and ask about your actions at the meeting of the AIG Compensation Committee that took place on March 11, 2008. According to documents that this committee's received, AIG has two bonus programs to reward executive performance. The first is called the Partners Plan. It covers the top approximately 700 AIG executives, and the second is called the Seniors Partners Plan, which applies to roughly the top 70 executives. Now, as CEO, you're paid under both those executive compensation plans. Is that right?
That is part of my compensation.
Now, as I understood it and looked at the rules that AIG had set, they tried to align pay with good performance. Rewards were supposed to be based on the company's performance. If performance went down and the company lost money, bonuses would be reduced or cut entirely. That was what was supposed to happen in 2007. And as a result of the disastrous fourth quarter results in 2007, bonuses under both those plans would have been cut under the normal rules. But according to the minutes of the meeting that took place on March 11th, the meeting of the Compensation Committee, you personally urged the board to rewrite the rules, and according to the minutes, and I don't know if we're posting them on the board, we had them earlier, but let me just read from the minutes of that meeting. It said, Mr. Sullivan next presented management's recommendation with respect to the earnout for the senior partners for the 2005-07 performance period, suggesting that the AIG FP unrealized market valuation loss should be excluded from the calculation. I think it's important to point out that just weeks earlier on February 28th, AIG just posted a record fourth quarter loss, as we've heard about, of $5.3 billion as a result of the AIG FP division. My question is very simple. You've referred to the unintended consequences. The question is, why did you change the rules, the compensation rules that were supposed to be pay for good performance? Why did you change them to give yourself and other executives a bigger bonus?
Okay. If I may, just for clarity, this was not the bonus structure for AIG. These were long-term compensation programs for AIG executives. So just to clarify that for you, sir. And secondly, I was not asking the Compensation Committee to rewrite the rules. I was asking them to use their discretion, which I believe existed under both programs. Coming back to, I testified earlier, or responded earlier, that my concern was that these 700 people that participated in the Partners Plan and the 70 in the Senior Partners Plan, none of them were in AIG FP. They had their, as others have mentioned, their own compensation plan. And my concern was that other parts of the business that were not being impacted by the events in the credit markets, we would lose key individuals if we didn't at least acknowledge in their remuneration, which was a long-term remuneration. They didn't get their money until sometime later.
If I could ask, I mean, you I understand, despite the fact that you left approximately June of this year, you received the $5.4 million bonus. Isn't that right? Is that not correct?
The reference to a bonus, if that was a number under the Senior Partner Plan, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Right. That may be the number, but I mean, it's not referred to as a bonus. But you
received this payment under the Senior Partners Plan, did you not?
It's paid out over a number of years.
I mean, the question is pretty clear. Your company had just taken a record loss. Pay for performance is supposed to be based on how the company performed, and yet you went before the board of directors and specifically asked them to ignore those losses for the purpose of the compensation plan, which had the direct result of giving you about $5.4 million extra compensation. If I could just ask you, Mr. Willemstad, because the minutes say that you were present at this particular compensation meeting, I have to ask you, in your role as a fiduciary to the stockholders, how does that payment, including the payment to Mr. Sullivan and the other executives, ignoring the losses that had just taken place, how does that conform to the rules of pay for good performance, and how does that benefit any stockholder?
If I could clarify some of the things you said.
There are actually three components to the incentive compensation plan for Mr. Sullivan. It was the partners plan, it was the senior partners plan, and there was a discretionary bonus. Mr. Sullivan received a $9 million discretionary bonus in 2006 when the company had an exceptional year. Mr. Sullivan's bonus was reduced in 2007 from $9 million to $2.5 million. So to put...
I understand that, Mr. Rooney. I'm referring to a particular request that was made at the board meeting with respect to the senior partners program, and the request was made and complied with by the board, accepted by the board at a time of record loss. And my question is very simple. How did that decision help the shareholders at this particular point in time, which is the responsibility of the board, is it not?
The senior partners plan was a plan that recognized the performance over a 3-year time period. 2007 was one of those 3 years. Mr. Sullivan's recommendation was to postpone the recognition of those losses because they were deemed to be unrealized losses. The understanding that the committee had and the board had is that, as Mr. Sullivan mentioned, there were 70 employees who were part of the senior partners plan, none of which had anything to do with the FP operations. It was only Mr. Sullivan who had any direct responsibility for that. So his intention, and I think the board's response, was not to penalize the other 68 or 69 employees for the result of one business unit.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just to conclude, I mean, it seems that pay for performance means you get paid whether it's bad performance or good performance, and you change the rules when it doesn't work out the way intended. I mean, if that's what part of the unintended consequences of this have been, I got to say a lot of people are scratching their heads when they look at how in good times you stick with the general scheme for pay for performance, and at bad times it gets reinterpreted in a way that benefits the executives. Anyway,
Gentlemen, yield to me.
I'd be happy to yield.
Just so we can get this straight. Mr. Sullivan, you were the CEO of the whole company, which included the FP in London, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And when it came to the question of the bonuses for the 70 employees, which included you, you asked the board, upon which Mr. Willems sat as the chair, to disregard the losses so that that 3-year bonus wouldn't be reduced. Is that right?
What I recommended to the compensation committee was that for the purposes of the senior partners plan and the partners plan, that they use their discretion in the calculation of the 07 year.
Not to count the losses, just to count the earnings, but not the losses.
The unrealized losses.
The unrealized losses. Yeah. Now, isn't it also the case that the AIG-FP changed the rules as well so that the bonuses there did not calculate the losses, unrealized as they might have been?
I don't think that's correct.
No,
Well, I have a document that says so. This is the minutes of the meeting of the Compensation Management Resources Committee of the Board of Directors, and it says, explained that AIG, Mr. Dooley presented management's recommendation, and explained that AIG management believes it is critical to provide a special incentive to assure retention of the AIG FP team while recognizing the serious effects of the valuation losses, and described the proposed terms of the alternative arrangements. Then it goes on to say no individual will receive compensation exceeding $1.25 million, and employees affected by the reduced compensation will be eligible for the deferred compensation. And it's just, that's the way we read this document. I'll put it in the record and we'll be able to look at it. But you got this FP, you got the bonus, you got the 3-year partners compensation. Did you get an ordinary salary as well?
Yes, sir.
And how much was that?
$1 million a year.
So you got $1 million a year, and then you got a bonus that was reduced from $9 million to $2.5 million. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then what else did you get?
my participation in the senior partners and the partners plan.
And how much money was that for that period of time?
I can't recall.
Take a
sir.
guess. More than a
Well,
million?
I think my colleague here
More than
mentioned
2
5
million?
million. I think, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but
Okay.
yeah.
We'd like to get it for the record. Let me tell you one person that didn't get a bonus while everybody else was getting bonuses. That was St. Dennis. Mr. St. Dennis, who tried to alert the two of you to the fact that you were running into big problems. He was blocked by the people in London from even understanding what was going on so he could report to you. He quit in frustration, and he didn't get a bonus. So the one guy that was really trying to do his job, and there may have been others as well, lost out on his bonus completely and was frustrated and felt he couldn't do his job, so he left. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr.
May I suggest, Chairman, with
Yes.
respect, that the company clarify the contents of the Compensation Committee's report so that you have an understanding. Maybe obviously, and I think Mr. Williams may concur, that was actually penalizing the FP folks at the time and trying to put a compensation structure in place that they would get rewarded as and when the marks came back. But I'm not
That's
certain
not
of
our
that.
understanding from the document.
Okay, well, that's why I suggest, sir, for the subject of clarity, maybe it would be helpful if the company explained it to the staff.
Well, you really,
only.
whatever penalties you imposed upon them, it's hard to see how difficult it is when you have Mr. Cassano not doing any work, but getting $1 million a month in case you need him, in addition to whatever else he got by way of bonuses and salaries and other money-sharing agreements. This is really quite a good deal.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just say, I mean, obviously as CEO, you oversaw the whole FP division as well, and yet you received a bonus despite the fact that they had these huge losses. And so, again, it's just people got to scratch their heads and wonder what pay for performance means when you have that kind of compensation structure and going before the board. Anyway, my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.